So this is a familiar parable, easy to understand. The Pharisee is a symbol of a person with great, overwhelming pride, and the tax collector, a man of great humility. Again, parables are meant to give us a teaching, a lesson. It's not a true story, but I would imagine Jesus saw situations like this in the temple and kind of drew from his experiences this delightful parable. You see, the Pharisee was really a good person. He wasn't a criminal. He didn't do any horrible crimes. He wasn't deserving of jail or imprisonment. In fact, he was better than most Jewish people. He said, I fast twice a week. Jewish laws only have to fast once a week. He said, I pay tithes on my whole income. Many Jews pay tithes only on their gross income. Or maybe they didn't tithe some of their produce or some of their animals, whatever. So he was really a very observant Jew, very good. But it was all about himself. Let's listen again to the words that Jesus put in this parable. The Pharisee spoke this prayer to himself, which he didn't talk to God. He said, oh God, but he really was talking, how wonderful I am. And it says he took his place in the temple or the synagogue, meaning he was right up in the front. He wanted everyone to hear how wonderful he was. It was all about himself. He went into the temple full of himself, and he went out of the temple full of himself. Nothing changed. He was the same proud, arrogant, conceited individual that he was from the very beginning. And that's, of course, the lesson that Jesus wanted to teach. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. Even though he's a Pharisee, even though he's in the hierarchy of the Jewish community and well-educated and should be looked up to, remember elsewhere Jesus said, listen to what they teach, but don't follow their practice, because they don't practice what they preach. Hypocrites, phonies, braggarts. Pretty strong condemnation. And then again, it says Jesus addresses parables who thought themselves self-righteous. Sure, I'm sure there were Pharisees in the audience, and they knew that Jesus was talking about them. The other individual was as far away from a Pharisee as possible. Yes, he was Jewish, but being a tax collector meant that he worked for Rome, the enemy empire. Rome had heavy taxation back then, and they taxed all their conquered nations to continue their wars and their conquests. And so a tax collector was like a traitor. He worked for the enemy. He went back to his own Jewish people, collected taxes from them, and how did he get his income? He would gouge them for as much as he could. So let's say the Roman tax was 15%. He'd knock on someone's door and say, you owe me 30%. 15% for Rome, 15% for me. And if they refused, he'd call in the Roman military. And they would beat that person, actually physically beat them, deprive them of some of the privileges they had as Roman citizens. So these two were as far apart as possible. The Pharisee, a good observant Jew. The tax collector, probably a criminal in the sense of stealing money from people by his unethical practices. But they both meet in the temple, one bragging about himself, and the other realizing, I'm a sinner. He went into the temple full of shame, full of sorrow, full of contrition, and he left the temple full of grace, full of God. So, of course, we are asked to imitate the latter. As Jesus said, the latter was justified. The former, the Pharisee, nothing changed in his life. I'm sure he came back every day or a couple times a week and continued to brag in front of anyone who would listen, how wonderful I am. Now, I hope none of us find ourselves as arrogant or as conceited or whatever as that Pharisee. And I hope none of us find ourselves as full of shame and guilt that we just don't like ourselves at all. But we've probably been near both positions in the course of our lifetime. I'm sure there are many times that you thought you were better than someone else, but we call that prejudice, thinking you're better than others. I'm sure there are times when you thought, wow, I really have messed this up. I'm really a horrible sinner. I need to get to confession, whatever. But I think the real lesson today is the final teaching of Jesus, Whoever humbles oneself will be great in the kingdom of heaven, will be exalted. So what is humility all about? Humility is not putting yourself down. Humility is not saying, I'm no good, I'm lousy, I'm terrible. Humility is taking an honest look at yourself and admitting your strengths and admitting your weaknesses. And saying, that's who I am. I do these things pretty well, and these other things I don't do as good as I could or should. I'm sure each of us have met some very humble people in our lives. Probably the most humble person I ever met was an Archbishop of Recife, Brazil. I'm going to say I met him maybe, 25, 30 years ago when I was at Christ the King. He was brought up from Brazil to help us celebrate the 100th birthday of Dorothy Day, the founder of the Catholic worker movement. And he was a renowned cardinal, almost as popular as our own Mother Teresa in our lifetime. He was an advocate for the poor. Dom Helder Camara. Google that and read about his life. An amazing gentleman. But because he opposed the government of Brazil, which was almost neo-fascist, neo-communist, they stripped him of his citizenship. For 10 years, he was a non-person. He was on no registration rolls, no census, whatever. So I remember when he came up and he stayed with me at the rectory there at Christ the King. And I said, well, Dom Helder, Dom is a Brazilian name, if you will, for father or bishop. Dom Helder, how old are you? He said, well, I think I'm 75, but they took away 10 years of my life, so I guess I'm only 65. I thought, what a nice way to look at the punishment that was given you. He wasn't upset. He wasn't vengeful. And then I was asked to ask him if he would be the main presider at the liturgy, which was going to be at St. Anne's Church, at the liturgy at St. Anne's for Dorothy Day's 100th birthday. And so I came back to the house and I said, Dom Helder, would you be the main celebrant at the liturgy for Dorothy Day? And he said, oh no. He is the main celebrant. I said, oh yeah, I meant after him. Could you be the next main celebrant? Again, what an honor to be the main celebrant. His English wasn't that great, so he didn't think he'd give the homily, but we wanted him to preside at the Mass. And that was the time when they were having a lot of testing of the atomic bombs over, in Mercury there. And he was going to go out to be part of a protest. And in those days, if you crossed the line there at the Nevada test site, you could be arrested. And so he told me, he said, I don't know whether I'm going to cross the line or not. So he came back from there. I said, did you cross the line? He said, no. I just knelt down and said a prayer. He said, now I have to call my secretary down in Brazil and tell her I'm not in jail. So I said, okay. So he makes a phone call. He comes back and he has $3.85. I said, what's that? He says, well, I got time and charges on the long-distance call I made. I wanted to pay you back for the phone call of $3.85. I thought, I have a living saint living with me, and you're going to pay me back $3 for using the phone. A man of true humility. And yes, his case is up for canonization. An amazing, humble man. So we need to have that type of humility. Another true story I hear, and when you hear it, don't worry, I'm not getting into politics, but it was a Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn. Sam Rayburn was Speaker of the House for 17 years. And one day he heard that one of the reporters, one of the journalists' daughter, had just died. And so the next morning, he went over to this journalist's home, knocked on the door, and he says, is there anything I can do? The man says, no, we're all just terribly upset. We're just trying to make funeral arrangements for our daughter. And so Sam Rayburn said, Speaker Sam Rayburn said, have you had your morning coffee yet? And he said, no, we haven't had time to do that. So he said, I'll go make coffee. So he went into the house to make coffee for this grieving family. And a few minutes later, the father said, Mr. Speaker, weren't you supposed to have breakfast with the president in the White House today? He said, oh yeah. He said, I called up the president and said, I can't make breakfast today with you. I got a friend who's in trouble. That's humility. That's humility. So how do we get to humility? without, again, pretending humility. Oh, I'm no good. We're fishing for compliment. Oh, you're really, really good. No, that's fake humility. Well, I found a list, and I have to go to my smartphone because it makes me look smart. And I'll publish this in the bulletin. 10 ways to be more humble. And these are true. Number 1, and you don't have to write them down or jot them down. Again, I'll send them out in email tomorrow or Tuesday at the latest. Number 1, admit you're not the best. You may be good at things. I'm good at things. You're good at things. That's okay. But I'm not the best of anything. So admit you're not the best. There's always someone better than you. Be humble. 2, recognize your flaws. We are all flawed individuals. None of us is perfect. I have many, many flaws. You've seen some of them. Some of them you haven't seen yet, but I have them. Let me tell you. Be grateful, not boastful. Be grateful. Thank you, Lord, for the gifts that I have. Thank you for the education I received. Thank you for whatever. So be grateful, not boastful. Number 4, admit when you make a mistake. That's really swallowing humble pie. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I let you down. I made a mistake. I goofed. Admit that. We all make mistakes. We're all sinners. Number 5, don't brag. Don't brag. No one likes a braggart. They just rub us the wrong way. Don't brag. Number 6, be more considerate, meaning think of others. Stop thinking of yourself. Didn't Jesus say that? Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor comes first, as yourself comes second. Number 7, appreciate others. Appreciate others. Tell them thank you, even for the ordinary things they do. Thank your spouse who's cooking dinner for you tonight. Thank your children for making your day happy. Thank people, appreciate them, and express that appreciation. Learn to put others first. It's number 8. Learn to put others first. Again, Jesus said that, as I just mentioned. Put others first, and then take care of yourself. How can I help you? If you see a need, do something about it. Don't walk away. Number 9, listen carefully. Listen carefully. You've heard the saying, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth on purpose, to do more listening and less talking. And number 10, accept all kinds of feedback. When you ask for feedback, you're going to get positive, you're going to get negative. Get it all in. Get it all there. So those are 10 ways to be more humble. And we don't want to be like the Pharisee. I'd rather be like that tax collector. And maybe a prayer I need to say often, and you need to say often, we need to say often, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner.